Are properties just the collection of things that have them? Let's consider. Hello, philosophers. I'm Chico. Welcome to the Philosopher Show, where we consider the greatest questions of human history. It's been a long time since I've touched the playlist on universals. And by the way, I'm going to change it from universals to, we'll call it just the playlist on properties, because universals will be one way of looking at properties, one answer to the question of what is properties. And it's been because I've been so nervous on touching Aristotle's view on universals, because there's kind of debate on exactly what it is that Aristotle held. Some people think that he was a trope theorist. Some people think that he believed in immanent universals. I'm more of the latter opinion. But that is a huge debate, and I don't really want to get into it. So I've been avoiding this playlist. Right now, this semester, I've got so much going on teaching-wise that I'm sort of don't have enough time to prepare stuff. So I'm looking through my stuff and I got stuff on universals. So I think what I'll do is I'm going to skip Aristotle and come back to him later. And I'm just going to get into some of the different views on properties that I have stuff prepared for. And we'll just go through that stuff and then just wait till later to touch on Aristotle. So first, let's refresh our memory on what properties are. Properties are things that you can say are true of different things. Really, that's what, if you're keeping track, that's what predicables are. But properties are similar, right? Like you'd say, this shirt is yellow. That's a property. It's got the yellowness. This shirt is, I don't know, like half a pound. This shirt is soft. Like all these different things are we would call properties of the shirt. And remember that Plato thought that properties were universals, where universals are real and shareable between the instances that have them. So for example, this yellow shirt would have the same thing as a yellow pencil has. They would share that universal. For Plato, he also thought that universals are separate from the things that have them. Right? They are transcendent. They exist apart from the things that have them. Now, what we need to notice about Plato is that he has posited new entities in our ontology. Our ontology is sort of our list of different things that exist, and new entities, not just like new things that we're used to, right? Universals are weird. Why would he posit these new things that exist? Well, remember, he was trying to explain three different things. The first one is predication. How can we say one thing is true of another thing? You know what we're going to do? I've been trying to avoid this because I wanted this playlist to be, my own stuff and kind of show my chops. But J.P. Moreland's got a really good, in his book Universals, has got a great example that we're just going to run through because it works so well. Imagine a red circle, all right? Just nothing but red circle. That's all it is. And we'll name it Kevin. So I'm going to change the names a little bit, protect the innocent. And we can say Kevin is red. And we look at that circle. Kevin is red. Notice Kevin has no parts, right? Kevin is, I realize that there are metaphysical parts, but just pretend like we don't know that. Pretend like we're just looking at this innocently without any kind of philosophical presumptions. And I don't see any parts here, right? It's just a simple circle. And when I say Kevin is red, the name Kevin is pointing to this circle. But the name red, what is the name red pointing to? Kevin's already pointing to the circle, right? What is red? A part of the circle? I don't see any parts here, right? There are no parts. So what could red be pointing to? Now, again, this is a very simplistic way of putting it. I realize that there are going to be ways that you're going to explain it, but at least this is something to explain. What is it that makes it the case that we can say one thing is true of another thing? This is predication. A second problem is exact similarity. So pretend there is another circle here. We'll name it Gary. And so now we have circle Kevin and circle Gary. Both of them we're going to say are red. Now, one thing can't exist in two different places, right? I wouldn't say Kevin is this circle and Kevin is this other circle, right? I couldn't say that because that would say that it exists in two different places, and things don't do that. But now I say Kevin is red and I say Gary is red. How is that possible? I just said the same thing can't exist in two places, but I also said red is here and red is here, right? Red is in two different places. How is it possible that we can have two things that are exactly the same, but exist in two different places? Or another way to put that is, how can two things share the same property? How can two things be exactly similar? A third issue is this. You may this whole time have been thinking, this is all a bunch of gobbledygook, right? And when I'm talking about red, maybe I don't see the part in there, but I'm pointing to something right there. And, I don't know how the same thing can exist in two different places, but I'm pointing to, two different things here. But what about if I'm not pointing to anything and I'm talking about red? What if I say something like, red is closer to orange than it is to blue? Red resembles orange more than it resembles blue. Or if I say something like, red is a color, wouldn't that be true even if I weren't talking about any red particular thing? Wouldn't that might even be true even if there were no red things at all? Possibly, right? So a third problem is abstract reference. How is it possible to say true things about properties apart from the things that have them? So those are three issues that we're trying to answer when we're dealing with properties. And again, Plato posits these entities, universals, specifically transcendent universals. And if you don't really know what I'm talking about, then go back and watch those videos on my playlist. And they're probably going to be very embarrassing because that was from my early days in making videos. But he posits these weird things called universals. Specifically, he'll call them the forms or ideas. And they are meant to explain these three things. But you might have an issue with that. You might say, like, look, you're saying that these things exist, but I don't see them, right? When I look at Kevin, right? When I say Kevin is red, I look at Kevin. I don't see some extra thing that's on there, and I only believe in the things that I can see. So you might be an extreme empiricist and say, I can't believe in universals because, those things are not things that you can perceive. More than likely, however, the problem that you're going to have with this is the problem that William of Occam had, which is that, if we can get away with explaining properties without having to posit entities, we should. And we're going to try to do so. And this is something called Occam's razor. Occam said, posit if you can get away with positing less entities, do so. Bertrand Russell had a great example. He said, like, if you could describe the entire universe using one system, and then a second system describes the universe as well, except for it says, oh, and I have to believe that there's a teapot that exists somewhere between Earth and Mars in order to explain the universe. You should go with the first system, the one that doesn't have to believe in a teapot floating between Earth and Mars. And that's what Occam is pointing out, is that we don't want to have to throw in random stuff if we can help it. Now, so the question is, can we help it, right? And that's something I think that a lot of times people in the properties game, they get committed to saying, we're just going to avoid universals and screw universals. And it doesn't matter if their system is more explanatorily powerful than the system that Plato came up with. They seem like they're just never going to go that way. So I don't know. Maybe that's something to keep in mind. So having said all that, look at Kevin. Do you see the part red? Do you see like a property there that is red? Is it a separate thing from Kevin itself? I don't see it in like separate properties sitting there that's on top of Kevin, right? So one thing you might say is maybe properties are not real. Maybe they don't exist. And if you said this, of course, you're not going to say, like, you're not crazy. So when you look at statements like Kevin is red, you're not going to say that's false. Or if you say Kevin is red and Gary is red, right? When we talk about exact similarity, you're not going to say that's false. Or saying red is a color, you're not going to say that's false. Abstract reference, right? So if you're going to say that properties are not actually real things, then how is it the case that these things are true? Well, notice in saying that Kevin is red and Gary is red and strawberries are red and these markers over here are red or whatever it is, you make a sort of a class of objects where a class is nothing but the collection of the things that make it up, right? So just a collection of its members. So you have a class here. Maybe it's the case that a property is just belonging to some class. This is what class nominalism would say. Object A has a property F, if and only if A is a member of the class of F things, where a class is just a collection of things, and two classes are identical if they have exactly the same members in their class. So, having said that, what makes it true that Kevin is red? Predication. How do we explain predication? How can you say that Kevin is red is a true thing? Because Kevin belongs to the class of red things. Easy. And how is it the case that you can have exact similarity? You can have Kevin is red and Gary is red. Well, another easy thing is they both are in the same class. They're both in the class of red things. Now, what about abstract reference? What about if I say something like red is a color? Well, that one, we can get a little creative here. We could say the class of red things is within a larger class, which is a class of colored things. Okay, not too bad. But what about red is closer to orange than to blue, right? Red resembles orange more than it resembles blue. Now it looks like we're in a sticking point, right? Because what do we mean by closer to? Geographically closer to? No, obviously not, right? In what sense could one class be closer to another class than a third class? Well, likely what you're picturing is just the class of red things, like, because you're picturing the property that they have, redness, and the property orangeness, right? And you're picturing those two things, and you're thinking about how they resemble each other. But unfortunately, with class nominalism, we can't do that. Because remember, properties, what a property is just class membership. So it's not that you have a property, redness, and that makes you part of a class. It's the reverse. You're in a class, and that makes you that makes it so that you, and that's all I should say. It doesn't give you the property. It's not like being in the class gives you the property red, because the property red isn't real. Being in the class, that's all it means to have the property red. Just means you happen to be in this class. So there's nothing like that you have that is real there, that is in any sense close to something that is over here in this class of things, right? The orange things. So you can't think about red and orange as properties and compare the two and say, oh, of course these classes are closer than this class over there. No, instead you have two class memberships, and you have to think of like almost like blank things in there and think, so how is it the case that a collection of blank things next to a collection of blank things could be closer than another collection of blank things? Like, how does that work? The only thing that we can really think of is spatially, right? But that's clearly not going to be the case. We wouldn't say that red things are closer to, like, physically closer to orange things than they're closer to blue things. That can't be what we're talking about. So the big objection here, and I think it's a killer, is that it seems like it gets things backwards. It seems like it's saying class membership is having a property, when having a property should be what dictates your class membership. Otherwise, how is it the case that you would know that this is a collection of red? I actually had a conversation with a student of mine that was a class nominalist. He was an AI guy, and he said that one of the ways that they teach computers to figure out what is correct to say is green, for example, is just they select a group of things, and they refine what goes into that class of things, and ultimately, like by trial and error, they happen to nail down the right class of things. And he's like, that's all it is to be green. This computer doesn't actually have the property greenness, doesn't perceive the property greenness, just gets the right class of things. And I was like, that's great, but how do you know it's getting the right class, right? How do you know that those are the right objects to go into that class? You have to know these things are actually green, and he's getting it right, or it's getting it right, I should say. It's getting the right objects in there in order to say that, yeah, this is the correct group of things that go into the class green, right? So the computer might work with classes, but the whole thing only works because you know what the property is. So in general, that's the big objection here, is that property possession determines class membership, not vice versa, right? It's not the case that you being in a class of things determines that you have a property. So that's class nominalism. Nominalism in general, properties don't exist. Class nominalism, when we talk about properties, those statements are true just because we're talking about classes of things. Next time we'll talk about resemblance nominalism. And same thing, properties don't exist, but when we're talking about properties, we're talking about resemblance relations. So we'll talk about that next time. But let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you in the next video. Adios.